Close your... Oh, you're filming.
Yeah.
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always be true. And then while I'm away, I'll write home every day to send all my loving to you. I'll pretend that I'm kissing the lips I am missing and hope that my dreams will come true. And then while I'm away, I'll write home every day to send all my loving to you. All my loving I will send to you. All my loving, darling, I'll be true.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
I'm falling. In all the good times I find myself longing for change. In all the bad times I fear myself. I'm off the deep end, watch as I dive in. I'll never meet the ground. Crash through the surface where they can't hurt us. Far from the shallow now.
Well, there it was, everybody. That was my take on the Kahoot theme.
Greetings. Welcome back from breakouts, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. I see we still got a strong crowd here. We appreciate you hanging in there. I hope you had some good conversations in your sessions. We're going to transition now to the next portion of our agenda, our famous hot topic Q&A session. Now, I wait all year to be able to introduce our hot topic Q&A section. So I can say things like, hot topics. You have them. We know you do. So just because we're meeting virtually doesn't mean you don't get to hear me sing the Hot Topics theme song. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask you to get a little involved here and start to tell us what are your hottest topics. I know the writing is quite small because we've got so many of them, but using text, or you can also use the pollev.com Ingenuity Chicago to respond. If you text Ingenuity CHGO to 22333 once to join, and after that you can actually vote for your hottest question. We'll be showing the top 8 and trying to work through them sequentially, but don't worry, even if we don't get to all of these hot topics, we'll be following up with you next week with a Q&A fact sheet that has all of these answers listed on them. So go ahead, we're going to give you a few moments here to vote for your hottest question by texting 22333 to Ingenuity CHGO and then selecting which number you'd like to vote for. I believe you can vote twice, and you can vote for the same question twice. Give you just a few moments for that. And Courtney, can you put the poll link in the chat, please? We're going to give you a few more minutes. And while you are voting, that video that you just watched was created last spring by the CPS Department of Arts Student Voice Committee. This was a group of students who meets regularly with the CPS Department of Arts under the leadership of Melissa Rakelis, such a dedicated and amazing group of young artists. And they created that video in response to how the arts are really helping them get through these challenging times. So go ahead, we'll give you just a few more minutes to respond. Okay. We're going to share our answers. We've got quite a few coming in here. Give me one moment to share my screen. There you go. Okay, great. So I will invite our panelists to unmute themselves and show your camera. We're going to show the top questions here. They're not listed sequentially, so I'm going to kind of map around the board here. But it looks like our first question that is of the hottest concern and interest area is around what arts partners have to do in order to be approved to work in remote CPS classrooms. How can partners ensure that their programs are following CPS's remote learning policies and guidance? And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Julia de Betancourt.
Hi, welcome back, everybody. And Nicole, I look forward to your Hot Topics song. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the encore. I look forward to it all year. I'm also going to ask Jessica Rodrigue, who is on the chat as well, to step in and make sure that I have given a complete answer. Jess is our Arts Education Operations Specialist. She started with us a little under a year ago, actually during the work stoppage, and we are incredibly pleased to have her. So she is our guru on all things budget, grants, procurement, vendors, and she does it with flair. So I wanted to make sure I give her appropriate shout out because we're so lucky to have her. But a few things that you need to be approved to work in the remote space are things that you've always needed, like an active vendor number. So making sure that those are in place is a first critical step. we are working with procurement to get ahead of things like vendor number deactivation. So that is something that we know has been a persistent challenge. If you're wondering about your vendor number status, you can email artsvendors@cps.edu to get that checked out. After you have your active vendor number, you also need to make sure that you have any agreements in place with CPS that you would need to do business. So if you are a regular vendor, that's a purchase order. So your purchase order is in lieu of a more formal contract with the district. If you are providing free services, Jess can talk in a moment about no cost services agreements. And if you are a strategic source vendor, which is what the Arts Partner RFQ is doing, you would need a signed board contract that said you were one of those. So those are the first two pieces. You also need the background checks. The background checks for your vendor employees, for your teaching artists who are entering schools. That's something, again, that you've always needed, but continues to stand in the virtual space, as was asked earlier. What is new is tier status. Tier status means that you have had a principal ask to work with you in the remote space and that they have received approval from a network chief or the Department of Procurement to be a remote learning partner. Now, that's something that we can also check in with you, check in for you and see if your organization has approved tier status. It started in the spring, so there was, in that chaotic moment, a lot of questions that I think went unanswered. So we're happy to look into that individually for arts partners. And in our remote learning guidance, there are specific guidelines about what a partner with tier status is and is not allowed to do and how they are allowed to interact. So you need all four of those pieces to be able to do work with CPS in the remote space. Three of those are old hat and things that we all know and work through together year over year, and the tier status is new. I want to turn it over to Jess to add anything that I may have forgotten.
I know a lot of you are really curious about your tier status, and a couple of things I would just remind folks is that if you have not actively been sponsored for a tier designation, that means you haven't gotten one yet. So work with a principal at one of your partnering schools to get that tier designation. Our department spent about a month or so pushing through as many as we could with our bandwidth, and now we're sort of handing that off at the school level to have pushed through. If you are unsure and you can't remember, did I apply for this back in the spring, please feel free to reach out to artsvendors@cps.edu, and I will do that research for you and figure out what your tier status is, and let you know and help you figure out how to get that sponsored if need be, and supply you with the form to get the principal of your partnering school going. A couple other things to keep in mind. I know there's lots of questions about why we're encouraging tier 1 versus tier 2. You know, CPS reserves tier 2 status for those vendors that are providing one-to-one services that really can't be modified into a group setting, that are really due to confidentiality issues and sharing of protected information such as health services and counseling. And so we in the Department of Arts are really encouraging folks to stick with that tier 1 designation. And if you have questions about that and you feel you really do need that tier 2 designation to do your work properly, please reach out to us and we will look into that with you and figure out how to best serve you in that process. And I know Julia also mentioned the no cost service agreement, and I know a lot of you are waiting for that from us, and I apologize for the delay. And it is actually something I will, once we are done with this, Julia and I have a conversation to move this forward with our law department. So we are currently working as hard as we can to get that for you. And if you are someone that is waiting for it, please don't hesitate to send me another email to remind me to get that out to you, and I will push that out to folks as soon as possible. We are getting it set up on DocuSign as well, so that it'll be as easy as possible for folks to fill out the form and access it and get that moving. And one other last thing about tier designation that I would keep in mind is that if you have a tier designation and you were sponsored by a school in the spring, you do not need to do it again. You only need sponsorship by one school, and then you are good to go across the district.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Nicole, I realized something, that there's a lot of members of the DAE team on on the call right now, and I just want to give them a moment to introduce themselves, if that would be okay, because you may be hearing from them. And we're actually a huge full team. The Department of Arts Education is now 11 people, which is really exciting. And so those of us that are on the call, would you mind if we took a moment for them just to unmute? And
No, that would be great.
That would be awesome. So I took the liberty of introducing Jess. I apologize, Jess. Jeff, Melissa, Rachel, could you, I'm sorry if anyone else that I've missed, could you just introduce yourselves? I see Melissa first, and then Melissa, could you popcorn?
Sure. Hi, my name is Melissa Rakelis. I am the manager of student programs for the Department of Arts Education. I'm going to popcorn it to Jeff.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Jeff Waraxa, manager of curriculum instruction and assessment. I primarily work on policy work and the Curriculum Equity Initiative, also known as Skyline, also known as Universal Curriculum. So all things curriculum, the best way to contact us is artscurriculum@cps.edu. Really, it's just checked by me, but it's a good way to keep track of all of the workflow. And Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Claff. I'm the manager of professional learning for the Arts Education Department, and I am in charge of designing and delivering all professional development in the arts for our CPS arts teachers, and also work closely with Nicole and Courtney on any joint initiatives with Ingenuity, especially the Arts Education Conference, which, crossing our fingers, we will have something at the end of the year, whether it's virtual or in person. Here's hoping for in person in the spring.
And I think Christine is actually on the call as well. Christine? Maybe not, maybe she's not available. But Christine Rudy Reed is our Fine and Performing Arts Schools specialist, and it is her job to support our 70 fine and performing arts schools. So thank you, Nicole, thank you for that space.
Of course, and it's so important that folks see this hard work that you're doing, Julia, and how you've been able to build this team. It's really incredible. Likely one of the largest arts ed teams in the whole country right now, right here in Chicago. What a model for the rest of our cities around the country. Okay, it looks like the majority of these questions, Julia, are for your team. The next one is also about tier status and kind of the differences between tier 1 and tier 2. We've talked a lot about that and really been encouraging folks and organizations to apply for tier 1 status. Can you tell us why?
Sure. I'm happy to. And again, Jess, if you'd like to chime in with anything I leave out, please feel free. As Jess mentioned, we at CPS reserve tier 2 status for partners who have programming that is not able to be augmented to be small group. And that is really because of the level of access that tier 2 status gives you. So you might think of something like counseling, mental health services, things that require confidentiality in order to happen. And while we recognize that there are one-to-one services like voice lessons and things like that that happen in the arts space, it is not a space that requires confidentiality between the program provider and the student. So things that come with tier 2 status include a cps.edu email address and include the ability to be one-on-one with students without a line of sight from a CPS administrator or CPS teacher. And so we take that very seriously. We are happy to hear case by case why you feel tier 2 would be right for you. And we know that principals and network chiefs are also open to hearing about that. But that is our guidance, that we ask arts partners to be really reflective practitioners when thinking about whether that's a level of access and a level of risk that you are needing to assume in order to deliver your programs authentically. So I'm not seeking to be dismissive of those cases that may really warrant it, but we want to engage with you and help you navigate those sensitive conversations. Jess, anything you would add?
No, I think the only other thing I'd mention is that with the tier 1 status, you can join a Google Meet that a teacher sets up. All you need to do is you don't even need a Gmail account to do that. You can join with any email, and you just have to make sure that whoever created the Meet lets you into it. So you don't need that cps.edu email to access the Google Meet. If the principal created it, they're the one that's going to let you in, or if the classroom teacher did, they're the one that's going to let you into the Meet. So just keep that in mind if you're having some access issues. Also feel free to reach out to us if you're struggling to get that piece figured out. But you shouldn't need that email to do that, and so that's something to keep in mind with tier 1. You're still going to be able to join those meets and get your programs up and running.
Great, thanks, Jess. Thanks, Julia. So this question, Julia, we kind of addressed a little bit earlier when we had our talk back with the chief and with you, but can you just kind of quickly reiterate the teaching artist background check question here?
Certainly. So background checks, as we know, need to be in place before a teaching artist starts work with your organization. That does not need to happen on an annual basis at this time. The Office of Safety and Security does reserve the right to refresh background checks, but at this time, if your teaching artist had a background check from the summer of 2018, which was the background check refresh, or later, that is valid to start work. If you have a new teaching artist that you are onboarding, yes, they do need to be background checked, and Accurate Biometrics is working to make that as safe and secure as possible. If you have questions about that, you can email arts vendors or backgroundcheck@cps.edu, and you can CC the DAE team so we know that your request has come in. We're always happy to support signal boosting a request. Departments like that are always facing a mountain of emails, and they work through them as quickly as possible, but we're happy to help signal boost, especially if you have an emergent need.
Great, thanks, Julia, for clarifying that. Okay, let's talk next about instructional technology. Lots of our folks viewing and tuning in have questions about what they can use and what they can't use. Would you like to elaborate, Julia?
I would, and I'm finding the language that our arts and technology librarian, Holly Abney, has equipped me with to make sure I am answering this question to the best of our ability. So Holly says, partners can use CPS-approved instructional technology if students have existing accounts with that software created in a CPS classroom. Please remember that students in a virtual classroom or after-school program may be using a variety of devices. That might be a PC, a Chromebook, an iPad. So it is best to use web-based, what she calls device-agnostic platforms. Some web-based platforms that are CPS approved include Adobe Spark, Book Creator, Canva, Google Canvas, Flipgrid, and WeVideo. Please keep in mind, if students have problems logging in, you, the arts partners, won't be able to help them since you won't have their email addresses or other account information. It might be best to plan art making activities based what you know students have in their homes, but to learn how to do things like hack your built-in computer camera into a document camera for live demos and access other CPS instructional technology tutorials, please visit a resource page on our website, and I will drop that link in just a moment so that you have access to that. That's from Holly. She's also super responsive, and we consult her a lot when we get questions about a specific app or a specific technology. We know that that's a murky gray area, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that that's clear.
Thanks, Julia. And just a reminder for everybody tuning in, we're going to be pushing back out to you an FAQ sheet that has all of the answers of these questions so that you will have a reference moving forward. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, let's move on to the next question before we switch gears and hear from some Ingenuity folks. How can partners align their instructional content and professional learning to the district's instructional priorities?
I'm so glad this was of interest. I'm going to hand things over to Rachel Claff to share about this.
Hi, everybody. Two of the main ways that you can make your content align to the district's instructional priorities and also ensure that your programs are attractive to CPS schools in doing so are to make sure that you are aligned to the Illinois art standards, and now making sure that you can speak at least somewhat to the instructional priorities for school year 2021. Those are in the arts education guidance document, those 6 instructional priorities, so that you can take a look at those. But I think the best ways possible to demonstrate to schools that you are aligned is to make sure that you can demonstrate that you are aligned to the Illinois Arts Learning Standards, which rolled out in 1819, and then to also keep in mind the instructional priorities. We do have on our website an Arts Learning Standards Toolkit that all schools, all arts teachers have access to. This contains all kinds of resource documents for aligning curriculum, instruction, and assessment to the standards. We continue to expand that every time we have a PD, because we've carefully designed a lot of our PD in the last few years to really hone in on what it looks like to work with the standards, understand them, and develop curriculum, instruction, and assessment aligned to them. So you can take advantage of that standards toolkit on our website as well. Thank you, Jeff, for dropping that in the chat. We also are now developing our professional development this year and beyond to align with the instructional priorities. So a lot of that, a lot of the resources that you will see going up in the next year will also be specifically honing in on how to enact those instructional priorities in the classroom. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have sort of in an unprecedented move by the Office of Teaching and Learning, begun an initiative to make sure that all content departments are sort of speaking with the same voice, which is super, super exciting. In the past, everybody has sort of done their own thing, and this is the first year that arts and also health and wellness and phys ed are joining the messaging around these instructional priorities and aligning all of our professional learning to those priorities. So somebody brought this up in a breakout session, I think in the advocacy session, about how do you make the case that arts are important, right? Well, this is a huge step for CPS to be able to say the arts are following the same instructional priorities, and if you follow these and adopt these in your school, everybody is working towards these same things. It's not that the arts are special or other or following some other, guidelines and standards. We have robust standards, and now we have robust instructional priorities that, and again, as someone pointed out in the breakout session the other day, at the advocacy session, that a lot of these instructional priorities, the arts are actually leading on, things like SEL. So that's really exciting, and it is a way to advocate further in the building, not only for schools, but for teachers, but for partners as well, to advocate for the importance of the arts. So if anybody has questions about any of that, they can feel free to email me. You can also email our delegated email at cpsarts@cps.edu, but happy to talk to anybody about working towards alignment, not only of your programs, but any professional development that you and your organization may be delivering to teachers and fellow partners.
Thanks, Rachel. That's super helpful. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. Our next question is about the Creative Schools certification and why we should care about that. So I'm going to invite Steve Schufelt, our Director of Data and Research, to unmute himself, show his camera, and help us understand that.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. So the Creative Schools certification is a scoring rubric that we at Ingenuity and CPS have used for the past 7 years to recognize where schools are in terms of their achievement in providing quality arts education opportunities to their students. The data that we use to calculate the Creative Schools scores all comes from information we collect through the Artlook platform. So why should that matter to you? Well, first of all, the schools receive a score when they complete their Creative Schools survey. And the Creative Schools survey is a requirement for a school to be eligible for any Creative Schools funds. So you have your Creative Schools survey, which you have to complete in order to be eligible for the Creative Schools Fund, which is then, and then the data is also used to generate your Creative Schools score or certification score. So those are all lots of Creative Schools things going on there. We also use all the data in Artlook in ways that Nicole has already talked to you some about. We use it to help develop professional development programs. We do all kinds of analyses to help support the Department of Arts Ed in the work they're doing to think about professional development for teachers and to think about targeted programs for students and so on. There's a lot of work that goes on in the background that we use that for. The last thing I'll just say about that, why is it sort of special note this year? A few things are different this year. To reiterate, we're collecting data right now in the fall. In fact, as today is the last day, is the official deadline for schools to provide their Creative Schools surveys. So if you are in contact with schools, maybe check in with them and see if they've done that. And if they haven't, give them a little encouragement. We're also not going to release Creative Schools certification scores for the 1920 school year. We will not do a public release of those scores. And the COVID and the disruption caused by the COVID pandemic is really the reason behind that. What that means is that on Artlook Map, we won't be displaying Creative Schools scores for the 1920 school year. Instead, we'll be displaying something for all schools that's called inability to rate. It does not change what I said about being able to, being eligible for Creative Schools Fund, the condition for that being having submitted a Creative Schools survey. And then I think the last piece, just to briefly mention, is that we are currently making some revisions to the Creative Schools certification, and we are in the process of preparing to work with CPS and the school quality rating policy to make it part of the district's official accountability system. We'll be following up with a link to a survey. We really need community input on some of the decisions we're making along that way, and to help make the case to the district that this is something worth doing. And so we'll be sending out a link to a very short survey, and we would really love you to provide your input through that survey. It's very short, and you might even find it interesting and entertaining if we can do things well.
I mean, data is interesting and entertaining, Steve, always.
I agree. Could
Thanks
not
so
agree
much.
more.
Okay, we've got just a couple minutes left here. I do want to address one more question. I'm going to invite Courtney, my partner in crime in partnerships and professional learning, to unmute herself and turn her video on to answer the trauma-informed training program that we are working on for Arts Partners. Courtney.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with you. I'm so glad that you've asked this question. So as Nicole alluded to earlier in the session, in Q2, Ingenuity will kick off a trauma-informed care training program for Arts Partners. So bringing together a team of trauma-informed organizations and practitioners, the program is going to aim to provide partners with sector-wide assistance and capacity building in understanding, implementing, and advancing trauma-informed care principles and competencies into organizational and programmatic practice. So the program will take a multi-month dive into the focus areas of trauma-informed care and include 2 primary segments. Segment 1 will include a series of over 10 trainings aimed at building a trauma-informed knowledge base. So the program will be divided, that initial segment will be divided into 2 learning tracks, one for organizations and the other for teaching artists and arts educators. For organizations, topics will range from building a remote trauma-informed work culture to organizational values and trauma-informed care. Educators will move through topics such as vicarious trauma and restorative practices. And those are just a couple of examples. There are also a number of topics related to trauma-informed care so that partners can select the trainings that they are most in need of. So that's why we'll have such a robust offering of programs, and you can really dig in and select the ones that are going to be most pertinent to your work. Then in segment 2, we'll take a collective impact approach like we've done with ARC and APSP, and take a closer look at trauma-informed practice specifically through the lens of the arts. So members of the arts partner community and art therapists will work collaboratively to co-source and knowledge share trauma-informed curricula, lessons, and pedagogy across artistic discipline. So the resulting elements of these sessions will be weaved into a final toolkit and guidebook for trauma-informed practice in the arts. So the toolkit will also include a trauma-informed care self-assessment, and that assessment will be mapped to all of the resources that you received in that first segment, building your knowledge base, as well as all of the resources from the second segment, which was the collective impact approach. So this is something different than we've ever done before in PPL. We're really taking a deep dive here on a topic and making it as comprehensive as possible for you. Yeah, so that's all I would say there. I'm gonna give it back to you, Nicole.
Thanks so much, Courtney. So we are wrapping up our day here together. We are so grateful that you have taken the time to be with us today. Here's what's up next. We will send you a follow-up email next week that'll have links to, as I mentioned, the hot topic FAQ resource with all of those questions answered for you. We'll also have links to the recordings of not only this main session, but all of the breakout sessions in case you wanted to see a different breakout session or see all of them. And we'll also follow up with a survey that includes getting your feedback on that SQRP process, some of your feedback on the changes that we've made and the changes you anticipate regarding the Creative School Fund, and also how this was today, how we did in responding to your needs this morning for our annual Arts Partner meeting. So thank you so very much. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend ahead. And in the meantime, please stay safe, please stay healthy, and please take care of yourselves and those you love. All our best. Bye-bye.